used a word I'm not quite happy with because people struggle in life. That's deadbeat. I see a lot of, like for instance, I had a friend named Kenny. He was a good person and he could have been a good father, but he was a deadbeat dad because he wasn't there. He wasn't there helping his family. Yeah, he paid child support. Yeah, money got sent to them, but he was a deadbeat dad for sure. But I don't like that word because Kenny was an alcoholic, still struggling with alcohol. He needed to get sober. That's why he was what he was. But there's millions of these people out there that don't take responsibility for their child's health, how they're dressed, how they're fed, and how they're sheltered. Now, I don't know if there's a single word out there to describe a father who doesn't care about what their son's shelter is like, doesn't care what his son is wearing for clothing, doesn't care what their son is eating, doesn't care what people are doing to their son, doesn't care what their son's health is. So if you ever hear me use the word deadbeat dad for, I don't know, Kenny, I don't really use it much for my own father because he did teach me some good lessons and he did spend money on whatever his wife wanted to do with me. Whatever their plan was, he would spend money. But remember, there was no shelter. A lot of times I was living in these horrific conditions with other orphans. The food, I got food poisoning, was forced to eat rotten food many times, as well as I was refused food many times for days on end, mostly because of medication issues and because I had no father around. If my father saw some of these things going down, maybe he would stop them, but he didn't. They would go on for years on end. So when I describe these type of issues, or when I use the word deadbeat, I'm talking about somebody who doesn't provide proper clothing, proper shelter, proper health, things like that. So keep that in mind. My father did provide some of these things, but there were also times where he did not provide these things. There were times where horrible, awful things were being done to me. I would speak up and nothing would change. And this is the problem with a lot of these kids with no mothers and no fathers out there, these orphans. We don't have a working system for them yet. We don't. We have minimum wage workers who are afraid to speak up that the fridge broke last night or they unplugged it and forgot to plug it in or something like that. And instead of taking responsibilities, we need new food, asking the program to do a new shop, they try to force the kids to eat rotten food. And then the kids get food poisoning. I've got food poisoning several times from situations like this. The worst one was in New Mexico. I was sick for weeks, and I probably could have passed away, and I wasn't the only one. Many kids got sick. And the worst part about it is the kids who refused to eat and didn't get sick, they were strangled and thrown around until they were blue. So the kids who did eat the food got food poisoning for weeks, were in bed vomiting, pale, dehydrated, terrible condition. Meanwhile, the kids who refused to eat got choked, strangled, punished horribly. So it was a lose-lose situation a lot of time with me. But my father, I did have an adopted father who said that he was going to take care of me, give me a home and a family, make sure my health wouldn't be failing, make sure I was fed, make sure I was clothed, make sure I had a roof over my head, things like that. So when you hear me use the word deadbeat or lacking father or something like that, keep in mind that my father did do some of these things. It just wasn't all of the time during my childhood. There were several times where I went without food. There were several times where I had to eat poisonous food. There were several times where I didn't have proper education, like schooling. There were plenty of times where I had no education. There was a whole year where I just played Yu-Gi-Oh cards. There was a whole year where I sat in a room in Maine while my mother just drank in the kitchen and then came in. Actually, she probably wasn't drinking too much at that time during the day. I don't know. I actually, at that age, at age 10 or 12, I wasn't paying as much attention. I know there was a lot of drinking after 5 o'clock, but she hid it during the day quite a bit. So, but she definitely wasn't right in the head. I don't know if it's the alcohol or medication or if that's just how she wasn't quite right in the head. I wasn't being taught any lessons in school. Like, I wasn't learning how to read in that room. I wasn't learning math in that room. There was just a pile of papers I was looking through. That's it. I would ask my mother a question about a paper. She'd tell me she didn't know. Now, I do got to give my father credit. There was at least 3 different occasions where he helped me with math. There were times where my father acted like a father. He just didn't do it all the time. So I got to give him credit where credit is due. He did teach me some good lessons, like school lessons, like math. There were times where he tried to be helpful. He tried to be a good father, but only some of the time. So keep that in mind as I go through all of these.